Welcome students to lesson 24 of the Urban World topic. In this lesson and the next one I'm going to show you an example of possibly the most sustainable city in the world. In previous lessons on cities we've explored Rio de Janeiro and Bristol, and I've shown you ways that they have tried to improve their environment. You've seen that Bristol has largely been more successful than Rio de Janeiro, partly because its problems are less severe. The city we're going to look at today is in Germany, and it is a model of how a city can become sustainable. In this lesson, I'm going to recap with you what sustainability means, and I'm going to show you how this city went about becoming more sustainable. And in the next lesson, we're going to be exploring how successful it's been, and we're going to be looking at a particular aspect of sustainability which relates to congestion. Please write the date, title, and learning objective, and have a pen and paper ready to learn. Time to review prior learning. Write 1 to 10, answer the questions from memory, and then mark your answers. Game time. Number 1. Bristol's new Temple Quarter regeneration project will construct more than 7,000 new, mostly affordable homes to attract residents. 2. The Engine Shed is an office building in Temple Quarter designed from an old train repair warehouse. It houses more than 150 quaternary sector companies. 3. Glass Wharf is a sustainable office building in Temple Quarter that recycles wastewater, is energy efficient, and has many large businesses within. 4. Bristol's Temple Quarter project aims to reduce air pollution by connecting the area to Bristol's Metrobus, a BRT transport system. 5. Only about 8% of Bristol's waste goes to landfill today. 6. The Avonmouth waste-to-energy power station provides electricity for 25,000 homes around Bristol. 7. Rio's Guanabara Bay was, in 2016, so polluted that 3 teaspoons would contain a virus. 8. Rio's Light Company, the energy provider, has made electricity more reliable and affordable, so there is less theft in favelas. 9. Many people migrated to Rio from northeast Brazil, which has a semi-arid climate. 10. Volcanologists monitor Mount Etna using satellites to detect changes in temperature from above. Give yourselves a mark out of 10. If you got 8 or more, fantastic. Any questions that you got wrong, test yourselves on these repeatedly until you've memorized them. To introduce the idea of sustainability in cities again, I'm going to show you 2 photos comparing 2 different cities. I'm going to show you some questions, answer the questions using the photos and your understanding. Question 1. Why is ecotourism sustainable? Well, if you've completed the lessons on the living world relating to the rainforest and hot deserts, you will have said that ecotourism is often sustainable because, number 1, it protects the environment from damage, but number 2, it does so by providing people with another source of income. For example, you might work in a restaurant, in a hotel. You might work as a maid or a manager in a hotel. You might work as a tour guide. All of these jobs provide people involved in ecotourism with an income that does not depend on damaging the natural environment. They don't need to be loggers. They don't need to be miners. They don't need to damage the ecosystems. And consequently, these jobs are sustainable because they are able to be provided in the future and evermore. Mining jobs will eventually run out because the natural resources will be exhausted. But also the environment will be damaged, and so the people in the future will have a worse quality of life because maybe their rivers might be polluted by chemicals that have been released from the mine. And consequently, ecotourism is an example of a sustainable activity. Question 2. Which of these 2 cities is likely to be more sustainable? You should have said that Freiburg in Germany is likely to be more sustainable. Why? Because look at the amount of air pollution being released by this coal power station and by these vehicles. By contrast, here you have renewable energy, solar panels, and you have public transport that's electrified. And so you have no harmful emissions. You also have urban greening here. Why does that make it sustainable? Well, the renewable energy leads to a lasting source of energy that will never run out, unlike coal power. Additionally, it doesn't release any harmful gases, so people's lungs aren't damaged who live in the city. It doesn't contribute to global warming. Public transport like this is sustainable because, again, it lasts, it's cheap, people will use it instead of driving by car, and it doesn't release any harmful emissions. 3. What features of a city make it sustainable? Well, if we consider the example of ecotourism, and we remember that sustainability is all about making people want to protect the environment and making people perform activities that allow their children and grandchildren to live just as well as they do, then you have to think that the features of a city that make it sustainable are things that don't damage the environment, things that provide all people with an income, things that prevent crime and urban dereliction. And if a city has these features, then it is likely to be sustainable. 4. What efforts has Bristol made to become more sustainable? Well, you should have remembered that Bristol became the European Green Capital in 2015. It did this through a massive urban greening programme where children were involved in planting trees and roads were turned into parks. It did this through encouraging businesses to become renewable and carbon neutral where they don't release CO2 emissions. It did this by changing its transportation system to an integrated transport system which involved Metrobus and cycling lanes and Oyster card systems so it's easy to use them. And it involved reducing waste and urban sprawl. And through all these efforts, Bristol has become more sustainable. Now in this lesson and the next one, I'm going to show you a city that has been yet more successful than Bristol, that has in fact been created from the ground up to be sustainable, and that is Freiburg in Germany. Let's go. So, again, what does it mean to be a sustainable city? Well, the two key pillars of sustainability are that a city does not damage the environment, it has strong environmental regulations, so we're talking very few air emissions, water pollution, and waste, very low of each of these three types of pollution. We're also talking about how a sustainable city provides everyone with a reliable income. That means they do not feel the need to damage the environment. So how does a city go about doing that? Well, let me show you 3 specific ways that a city might go about becoming sustainable. The first is in its energy supply. Cities use enormous amounts of electricity and heating because of their large populations in a small area, high population density. If a city can transform its energy supply to be completely renewable based on, for example, solar power and wind power, then it can dramatically reduce the air pollution caused by its energy use. More than 80% of all greenhouse gas emissions in the world are the result of activities in cities and of the resource use in cities. So if we can change the way energy is used, then you can mitigate the environmental impact of cities. You can make them more sustainable. Additionally, transport needs to change. 15% of all greenhouse gas emissions in the world are the result of transport, namely polluting vehicles such as cars and lorries and ships and aeroplanes. If you can change transport like this to a bus rapid transit system, this is Curitiba, a city in Brazil, where you have electrified buses, then you can dramatically reduce the amount of energy used in the form of fuel to get people around, and you can dramatically reduce the air pollution from each vehicle, and consequently, you can improve the sustainability of the city. And another one is what Bristol has done, and other cities. If you reduce a city's waste, then you can make it more sustainable. If you encourage people to recycle, and if you use food waste in clever ways like turning it into energy, then you dramatically reduce the amount of waste that goes into landfills, and you can improve people's incomes, since recycling and waste energy creates incomes in its own way. So how are these 3 things likely to be sustainable? How do they meet the criteria for sustainability, which is environmental protection and providing people with good incomes? Well, they create jobs and they improve productivity. Transport means people are more productive. If they can get to work faster through bus rapid transit or cycling schemes, then they can work better. This provides them with a higher income. By improving public transport, you reduce congestion. And by making public transport reliable and cheap, you dramatically reduce demand for cars. And so people want to be more sustainable. They want to take this form of transport. And as a result of increasing their incomes, through increasing their productivity, you give people an incentive to take public transport. And so it's sustainable. People don't want to damage the environment by driving cars because it's not in their best interests. Additionally, this leads to economic growth in a city. If people are making more money and businesses are investing more in a city, there are more taxes for the government. The government then uses those taxes to reinvest in infrastructure in a city, in education, in healthcare, attracting yet more business, increasing productivity yet further, and leading to greater prosperity, which means richness, in a city, all the while not damaging the environment. So the first criteria of sustainability, providing people with lasting jobs that makes them not want to damage the environment. But the second criteria is mitigating environmental impacts like this. Renewable energy, waste recycling, and public transport both reduce air pollution, both from transport and energy supply, but also dramatically reduce pollution caused by waste, solid waste, and wastewater. Landfills are harmful, both because they take up lots of space, but also because the leakage of chemicals in landfills into the soil and into water supplies very often contaminates people's drinking water and damages ecosystems, since animals also rely on water supplies. And so these three features of cities are sustainable. They are examples of how cities can become more sustainable. Not many cities around the world have sustainable examples of these features. The city we're going to look at today is an example of a model city that has been able to make itself sustainable in these three ways and more. Let me show you how it's done that. The city is called Freiburg, and it's in Germany, one of the richest countries in the world and Europe's richest country. So we're geographers, so the first question we ask is, where is Freiburg? Well, Freiburg is located in southwest Germany, the largest country in Europe by area and population. Specifically, the largest country in the European Union. In Freiburg, here, a small city in the southwest, in the German state of Baden-Württemberg, there is a city of a population of 240,000 people approximately. And we're going to focus on a specific part of Freiburg called the Vauban district, which looks like this. You may already be able to tell how it is sustainable. So what has Freiburg done differently to other cities to make it more sustainable? Well, the key difference between Freiburg and other cities, especially the Vauban district of Freiburg, which is about a quarter of its total size in the southwest part of the city, is that it has planned the city from the ground up before it's built any of its buildings with the goal of becoming sustainable, of providing people with good incomes and jobs, but also of preventing environmental impacts. And there are three principal ways that it has gone about doing this that have led it to become a sustainable city. The first is, at the very start of its planning, it thought about the potential environmental risks of building a city and how it could reduce them. This is called environmental planning. It thought about the three main types of pollution, waste, water, and air pollution, and it focused on waste. And it said, right, we can do what other cities in HSEs around the world have done and convert waste to energy. So from the ground up, they built an enormous waste-to-energy plant, this one here. It provides enough energy for 28,000 homes in Freiburg. That's almost a third of the population being provided by electricity purely from recycled food waste. Additionally, recycling and waste collection is so efficient in Freiburg that 75% of the city's waste is recycled, and only a tiny fraction of it reaches a landfill. That's the first step. Steps like this, environmental plans, for example through Freiburg's efforts to reduce environmental impacts, demonstrate how Freiburg has become sustainable. And it put these plans in place before it built a single building in the Vauban district. Why is this better? Well, it means that the infrastructure takes the first place. The lorries were built and provided before the population arrived. The waste-to-energy site was built at the right scale and size to meet the needs of that population, so it wouldn't be overwhelmed. Additionally, if you want to be a really sustainable city, you have to involve the people. The people need to be able to take part in this sustainability, and they need to want to take part. You need to improve equality in the city. Everyone needs to be able to have an affordable access to behaving in a sustainable way. And this is called social planning. Freiburg wants to reduce the environmental impacts of energy supply, and so it wants people to install solar panels and to reduce energy use within their homes. However, this doesn't just happen automatically. People have limited incomes and often can't afford to install solar panels or to reduce energy use, or to have no incentive to do so. So Freiburg has encouraged that. At the beginning of the construction of the Vauban district, the government of Freiburg had meetings with local people and asked them what they need and surveyed them on their key priorities. And it came up with 2 specific plans. It provided people with an incentive to install solar panels on their homes like those you see here. And it did that by paying a subsidy, which is money from the government, to reduce the initial cost of the solar panels. This made solar panels affordable to the local people. Not only that, it ran a competition with the local people to see who could minimize their energy, water, and waste consumption. And in doing so, to encourage people to do so, it provided people with incentives such as football season tickets like this to the local team. This was advocated, which means pushed by the local people, as a strong motivator for the people to invest in renewable energy, and so it turned out to be. By providing people with incentives, rewards, and incentives through subsidies, Freiburg was able to involve the local people in its plans and make sustainability affordable to them. And finally, if you want to ensure true sustainability, you need to give an economic reason for something to last. For someone not to take a car to work, for someone not to produce a lot of waste, for someone to install solar panels, for someone to be able to afford public transport, they need to have money. And so, the centerpiece of Freiburg's planning is an economic plan, giving people excellent, high-paid, reliable, green jobs, which means jobs in businesses that do not release CO2, and jobs in businesses that invest and manufacture sustainable goods. There are more than 12,000 jobs available in Freiburg in the renewable energy industry, specifically in solar power. Freiburg manufactures more solar panels than any other city in Europe, and it installs more of them as well, with the effect that more than 600 homes in Freiburg in 2014 and more than 850 homes in 2019 had solar panels on top of them. Many students at Freiburg University go on to study technology, specifically energy technology, to learn about how to improve solar panels. And consequently, Freiburg has an average income that is above Germany's GDP per capita. People are affluent in Freiburg, and consequently can afford to install renewable energy, can afford to use public transport, and can afford to live sustainably. They also provide lots of taxes to the government to be able to invest in environmental planning, such as in waste collection and waste energy. And what's the impact of all of these plans? What makes Freiburg different now? Well, Freiburg's environmental impact is far below any other German city. Freiburg's people produce 25% less waste than the average German, and its air pollution levels have never gone above the World Health Organization's safe limit. Matter of fact, there are 3 scales for air quality according to the World Health Organization. You have good, moderate, and severe. Freiburg, 95% of the time, has good air quality, which means it's healthy for people. This is because there are far fewer cars per person than in average German cities, and more public transport. Incomes, as I mentioned, are higher than the average German city, meaning that people can afford to invest themselves and as part of the government in improving the sustainability of the city. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, if you saw in Rio de Janeiro, one of the causes of great environmental impacts was the inequality in the city. The favelas lacked infrastructure, and people lacked an education or information or infrastructure to be able to take advantage of sustainability. Sewage was released straight into streets and into rivers. Waste wasn't collected. People lacked the money to install solar panels or to take public transport reliably. Equality, providing everyone with access to affordable homes that are sustainable and good jobs, is the only way for a city to become truly sustainable like this. And it explains why so many cities around the world, for example Lagos in Nigeria, which has extremely high inequality, a few rich people and many poor people, really struggle to become sustainable. Freiburg's Gini coefficient, which is a measure of inequality, it shows how many people have how much money and how money is distributed amongst the people, is very low, which means it's very equal. The city is very equal. That's a consequence of Freiburg planning for sustainability like this. Today, as a result of all of these efforts, Freiburg has massive green areas across the city. It has a high percent of its energy coming from renewable energy. It has low waste production, and it has high average incomes. Time to assess learning. How might the amount of deindustrialization in a city affect its sustainability? Well, you should have said that deindustrialization leads to urban decline. Unemployed people and lack of investment lead to high crime and dereliction of factories in the centre of cities, causing affluent people to move out. These derelict areas are not only ugly, but they also have often got harmful chemicals within them that are released when it rains into the natural environment. And consequently, cities with higher levels of deindustrialization tend to struggle more with being sustainable. Question 2. How might the rate of population growth in a city affect its ability to become sustainable? Well, you should have said that higher population growth will make a city struggle more to become sustainable, since not only is it harder to provide people with high-paid jobs, but also it's harder for a government to adequately invest in the infrastructure needed for a city to be sustainable, in renewable energy, in sewers, in waste to energy, for example. 3. Explain why bus rapid transit, especially electric buses, meet the criteria for urban sustainability. You should have said that bus rapid transit provides reduced air pollution benefits. It also increases productivity since it reduces congestion, allowing people to get to work faster, work better, increase their incomes, and therefore want to take cars less. It creates an incentive to take public transport and reduces environmental impacts, which means that people in the future will have good air quality, will be able to grow up as healthy as we do, and will be able to get better jobs because of the better transport. So that's what makes it sustainable. Time to embed learning. Read the questions, answer them using your understanding, and then mark your answers. Number 1. How does deindustrialization affect urban dereliction? Make sure you have 2 of these points, especially the first 2, most important. Any of these 1, 2, or 3 are fine. 2. You need the second and third points, definitely. If you have the first one as well, fantastic. 3. You need 2 of these points at least. Make sure you use the keywords and phrases that I've underlined. Explain it as I have. Say the phrase "so that," "leads to." These are key ways of explaining something. And 4. Question 4. How is social planning important? Make sure you have 2 of these points. Explain them as I have. Use these keywords. Remember how you use examples to explain points. Give yourselves a mark out of the total. Add any corrections and any missed parts in green pen. Go over the questions that you've missed or mistaken in a week's time and attempt them again from memory. From the lesson, write 2 questions, answer them from memory, and in a week's time, test yourselves on them. In the description below this video, I link a video about the Vauban district in Freiburg. I strongly recommend you watch it in preparation for the final lesson of the urban world topic. Join me then.